Good morning and welcome to the Gospel Loft. We're still in the book of Revelations and we come to chapter 18. Very interesting chapter. It concerns Babylon economically. And somehow it paints a bleak picture for our economic well-being. We want to read chapter 18 and verse 1. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. The messenger could be Jesus himself, who comes with glorious might to judge God's opposition. The whole of the 18th chapter speaks of the destruction of Babylon economically. The system started with Cain. After the flood was continued through Ham and Cush, who begot Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Now, the devil shapes and forms a man to become a hunter. The Lord makes him into a shepherd. These two principles have fought against each other from the beginning. Hunters are concerned about things, whereas shepherds are dedicated to the well-being of the people. The antique city of Babylon became the status symbol of all Antichrist activities. Economically, the ancient city was completely independent, as it produced everything within its walls. The world outside came to her to trade and to enjoy her costly delicacies. As long as the life stream of the Euphrates was flowing through her, nothing could harm her. In our modern society, Babylon represents our Western economic system. And as long as the stream of money flows through it, nothing can happen to it. The danger of this time comes from above with the mighty angel in glorious apparel. The one weak point of Babylon is that she wanted to be greater than Jerusalem. And in verse 2 it says, "And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen. It's fallen and it's become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean, hateful bird." The antique city had 100 gates within 25 streets, going in every direction. The walls were 80 feet thick and 250 to 300 feet high. On her walls were 250 towers and chariots. Races were held on top of the walls. The gates could be closed and built up so that the enemies could be kept outside for over 20 years. When the Medes and the Persians beleaguered the city, the Babylonians mocked them from on top of the wall, as they seemed like grasshoppers rather than soldiers. This went on until Cyrus, the general of the Medes, came up with a plan to divert the Euphrates River and lead it around the city. Now, Babylon fell in one night. Today the place is deserted and uninhabited. Even the shepherds failed to go there with their flocks, as they say it is haunted by evil spirits. Never again will anyone build there a city. But the spirit of Babylon survived together with the priests that managed to flee from the city. So godless is Babylonian economic system that God will destroy it. After this verse, the prophet leaves the ancient city behind and he looks far into the future of our own time. Verse 3, "For all nations have drunk of the wine of her wrath, of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies." First it was the rulers of Rome who built for themselves a monumental city to celebrate their successes. After the fall of Rome, something even more pompous rose up from its ashes. gold, silver, precious stones, everything that the heart could desire, found its way into the Vatican. The merchants of the kings of the world have taken Babylon as their blueprint for modern success, which guarantees the rich to become richer and the poor to become poorer. Men are put into slavery over her. The average person thinks that if they can buy a car, a house, a holiday abroad and an education for their children, that they are no longer slaves. Yet most Westerners work more than 6 months every year just for the state to pay their taxes. Then for the bank, and then for the insurance companies. Verse 4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues." God warns his people. Do not partake of this evil system and forsake Babylon's tyranny. For a person living in a first world economy, it seems almost impossible to loosen himself or herself from the system. The question is, what is fundamentally wrong with it? I believe what makes us primarily to slaves is debt in any form. We have our houses bonded, our cars on hire purchase, our holiday, our clothes, food, and even our entertainment is put onto our credit cards. To crown it all, we struggle with a bank overdraft. To keep everything going and our heads just above water, we have 2 jobs. The wife is working and the children are neglected. We live in a concrete jungle, breathe in air which is polluted, eat artificial junk food and meat pumped full of hormones. We are insured to the hilt against any possibility because we are too fearful to trust the Lord. Deep inside we know that Babylon has provided all our possessions, and it is up to the God of Babylon, Satan, to leave it with us or to remove it again. On the other hand, we have been blessed by God. It is only he who can remove himself from all this that can enjoy the other side and the blessings of God. And the world is crying out, it is impossible to forsake Babylon. It is impossible to come out of her. As long as we believe this, we are enslaved. But as soon as we make room for the call of God, the call of the angel, we will see a way out. The Lord warns us that if we do not make an effort to come out of her and forsake her sins, her plagues will come our way. Verse 5. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Oh yeah, we're in a state of emergency. The time has become short, as the cup is filled to overflowing with her iniquities. But before the final blow from the Lord, he reveals a riddle that could bring us out of this mess. Verse 6. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she has filled, fill her double. The punishment that we can pass on to her is simply to educate the world against her. We advertise, forsake her, she is against you. The banks who have robbed us for centuries cannot exist if we do not bring her anything nor borrow from her. The insurance companies can no longer sell their empty promises if we fail to believe their fearful promotions. The merchants can only survive as long as we purchase from them. Most of the items we buy are not necessities, but excess baggage. Verse 7. How much she has glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she says in her heart, I sit the queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. The finance advisors, they tell us that never again can anything happen to our stocks and shares as we have seen it in the 1920s of the last centuries. I, on the other hand, will say that the volume today is so much larger that the collapse of the 1920s is like a child's play compared to what is in store for us. The financial world is saying we shall see no sorrow, and has seduced the whole world to believe her. They have forgotten that God has the final say in the affairs of men, and that he has already spoken the word over 2,000 years ago. Verse 8, therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, mourning, and famine, and she shall be utterly burnt with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. The judgment of God is compared with fire, as it leaves a small heap of ashes, which is insignificant compared to what was there before. Within a day, or a day's year, famine and death and plague will come. And we cannot imagine what can happen to millions of urban people in 1 year, should there be no economic activity. The man in the country can still survive if he has planted something or has animals that will support him. In a city without consumables on the shelves and without money to buy, disaster has struck. Famine and disease will come quickly. I cannot push the thought from my mind that we are dealing here partially with the synagogue of Satan and its Zionistic ambitions to rule the world with its banking powers. Verse 9 to 11. And the kings of the earth, who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour thy judgment is come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buys their merchandise anymore. An economic collapse makes money useless. In Germany, at the end of the Second World War, a wheelbarrow full of money was needed to buy one bread, because there was no value to the notes. At the end, all the money was just burned, because one could buy nothing with it any longer. It was a foretaste of something yet to come. When the monetary system of the world collapses, the goods become useless. The variety of products in our shops make me wonder if there is really a need for all this. The verses above tell us that it will surely come to pass, and when it all begins, it will speedily be finished. If the stock exchange crashes, so will the banks and the insurance companies and all other financial institutions. The result is total chaos. We had another foretaste of it in 2004, 2008. Only a huge government intervention saved some of the major banks. What are we to do? Plan at least a backup system, I say. Now verses 12 to 13. The merchandise of gold and of silver and precious stones, of pearls, of fine linen and purple, and silk and scarlet and all fine wood, all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner of vessels of precious wood, and of brass and iron and marble and cinnamon and odors and ointments, frankincense and wine, and oil and fine flour and wheat, and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. It begins with gold and silver, and it ends with the souls of men. The list represents a line of liquidity. Money is the easiest to dispose of. The soul of man, the hardest. The easiest to dispose of. The list, nevertheless, reflects the whole spectrum of goods our economy is dealing in. Textiles, furnishing, pharmaceuticals, perfumes, transport, agriculture, food, war, pleasure, and building materials, etc. are listed in our verses. Every part of our industry is affected, and the only thing missing is land. Amazingly. Makes you think. Every other part is laid lame. Only land will not go away. verse 14 and 16. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which are dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, and purple and scarlet and precious stones and pearls. We know that our investments in Babylon are quite unsure, and yet we continue to do just the same as our neighbors, namely to enjoy her fruit for a season. A part of us wishes deep down that these prophecies should not be for our generation, and that we still would have time to enjoy our pensions, which we have paid faithfully into the coffers of Babel. We hope that such tribulation would hit perhaps a more sinful generation. On the other hand, we have the opportunity to avoid the plagues by simply forsaking the system and to be led of the Lord instead. The claws of Babylon sit deep and refuse to let go. In our own strength, we will surely fail, but with God's help, all things are possible. Although being in the world, we can withhold ourselves from partaking of the evils thereof. I doubt very much that it is the will of God that we should live in a concrete jungle and purchase everything that our heart desires. The commandment of the Lord to Adam was to tend and to keep the garden. Remember that it was Cain who built the first city and caused his family to live in it. He even named it after his son. Maybe we should create a little distance between us and the things that hold us in such a grip, just to gain a balance in our lives. Verses 17 to 19. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company in ships, sailors and as many as strayed by sea, stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her board burning, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. When a man is warned and he hears the warning that something terrible is going to happen, he has the opportunity to do something about it. Most people do not want to hear when God has something to say, and rather complain about him and to him afterwards. Millions of people will stand totally perplexed when this prophecy is fulfilled, when in 1 hour their whole existence is wiped out. If we calculate 1 day for 1 year, this would give us a time span of about 15 days. Only a few people in our society would be able to survive without money. Even those on the ships stand helpless when they see the smoke of her destruction rising up. If a natural disaster strikes anywhere, there are always people who can help a suffering community over a bad patch. In our case, all that are involved with Babylon are drawn into it. And there is no way out, and no one is there who is able to help anymore because they're all affected. Yet even the poor think that their lot would change if they could only get a foothold in the system of Babylon. Verses 20, 23. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. And the mighty angel took a stone like a great millstone, cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians, of the pipers and the trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. And no craftsman of whatever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. The reason why heaven is rejoicing is because God has avenged those who were killed through Babylon. From the time Abel was killed and Cain went east of Eden to lay the foundation to what later developed into this Babylonian system, until the last saint was killed by her, the earth is crying for revenge. Her destruction is therefore total and complete. Nothing of her will remain, and her fornications will come to an end. Even the ordinary activities of life will cease. Like a millstone, she will drown and be no more at all. The inhabitants of the earth will be perplexed. Had she not supplied them with all that they enjoyed? Of course she did. We are already in great panic when we have a power failure for a few hours, or a fuel shortage for a few days. The world comes to a standstill and it is cast into darkness. How would it be when the lamp is without light forever? Greater chaos cannot come as when no wages are paid, no work created, no computer has any use, no plane can fly, and no car be driven. We cannot comprehend such a disaster. And the only thing it really needs is just a needle into a balloon that has just been pumped up with fresh air. That is what the system is all about. There is nothing available behind the stock market. There is no value there, just fresh air. It just needs that needle of God to pop the balloon, and the whole thing is coming tumbling down, and we don't want to believe it. Yes. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. The Babylonian system is oiled well and serves to the end that the rich become lords and the poor become slaves. In our schools we are already educated to borrow money from the banking lords for things that the industrial lords produce, for which things we hardly have any need or use. We are brainwashed into consumerism and made to believe that if we do not purchase, we would have no workplace to feed us. As soon as we are debt-free, the banks send us letter after letter to try to seduce us into more debt. This newly borrowed money gives us for one moment the idea of being lords ourselves, until the day when we have to pay it back with interest. Even the third world is stirred up to partake of this evil and is promised a glorious future. The prophets and the saints of God have preached against this system from the beginning and were killed for interfering with the rich of this world. To leave the system is perhaps one of the most difficult tasks we could be faced with. We need to start with prayer, and God will show the way. As soon as we take the first step, He will show us the next. We need to be set free from this illusion of prosperity and spend our efforts to spread the gospel. Provision is of the Lord, as He has promised. We just need to jump the ship by faith. It starts small, but first we need to get rid of all financial debt. Yes, small and big. Even if it means to drive an older car, to live in a smaller house, to enjoy a meal at home instead of in the 5-star hotel and restaurant. You will see that as soon as we are free from debt, we are free from slavery of Babylon. And you know what? We'll sleep like babies at night when no more debt is burdening us. Until this far. Next time we will do chapter 19. The next angle of Babylon we'll discuss then. May God bless you. Amen.